Hello guys! Welcome back to Not Just Mecha! It's Marco here, and today we speed paint with the most modern version of the classic layering. I don't really like codified painting systems, or the obsession for single techniques that become painting systems, because this takes away from you elasticity, interesting options of tools and methods, and a healthier, holistic view on painting. But a single technique approach is still great while you are learning and absorbing the ways of that specific method. Or, like in this case, when that technique is the perfect tool to deliver precisely the look you are looking for. Here the plan is to give the idea that between his life as Legionnaire and Demon Prince, this guy has been around for at the very least a dozen millennia, wearing the same rugged, worn-out, scratchy armor, and with a thick, crusty, leathery skin stretched between his huge, unnatural body and the mutated equipment. So, because of the needs of this look, fully based on visually tactile sensations and an overload of drone and real physical textures, I decided to use an aggressive overlap of layers to deliver all that information in a super quick and extremely enjoyable way. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, check my Patreon page, that keeps the lights on, and where I publish the real-time footage of my videos, articles and extra cool stuff. Thanks a million, guys! The black primer has a subtle, interesting function here. Of course, I use it to apply a good seal and a uniform base to the plastic of the figure and the organic materials on the base. But because of the size of the model and the plan to go heavy on layering tones, this black will also represent the deepest, darkest value of the most hidden areas and sharpest recesses. For any other human-sized model, even in larger scales, but still humanoid size, I would have gone directly with a solid dark color to suggest less deep and dramatic shadows. But even painting with thick, opaque layers, I don't really want to work on pure black. The black layer is able to absorb and kill a ton of luminosity and vibrancy from the next colors, and re-establishing the darker shadows later, it's generally quicker and easier than building up light over pure darkness. So, still leaving black in the right spots, I start the chromatic climb more or less from the middle, with a value that's slightly darker than a proper mid-tone, and a cold bluish violet tone that will create a nice contrast with the warm local hue of the red skin and the soft warm light I imagined for the setting. Same reasoning on the base layer of the armor. Even if it will end up as a reflective black surface, in this phase my main concern is the chromatic nature of that material, that I wanted to express a cold bluish tint, able to create a solid contrast of temperatures with the final, super warm, fiery look of the skin. But, of course, all these materials are living in the same setting of cold shadows and warm lights. So, as you'll see later, their local internal progression from dark to light will follow the same pattern of cold to warm relative progression. I want horns and bones to be even lighter, colder, and more in contrast with the skin. So I establish a light base layer with an icy green turquoise. Again, I'm not looking for any modulation, but just a flat, colored base, and a low, mid-value, mid-tone starting point for the brushwork. So I use the airbrush just for the extra speed, and you can totally do this step with the brush. And this is a total overkill. I use a dark brown to create a base for the bronze gold elements. Metallic paint is opaque enough to do most of the job by itself, and on this kind of ancient, worn-out metal, I wouldn't mind a bit of desaturation coming in transparency from the black primer. But the stakes are low, the application is fast, and I'm already in 5th gear, so I can't really stop. Again, if you're working full brush, you can totally skip this step. I complete the preparatory work, applying a solid base of a muted bronze color as foundation for the true metallic gold trims, and a dark bluish silver for all the other minor metallic elements. Ooh, and the big sword. At the moment, it's probably difficult to visualize, but the scheme of the model is all in place as a flat render of the first shadows of every element. So at this point in my mind, I have just to follow the map and enjoy the flow with the brush without thinking too much. But before I start moving thick paint around, I hit everything with a quick oil wash. In this stage, I need just 2 colors to set the cold dark lining. A deep magenta for the naturally warmer gold trims, and a rich dark blue Payne's Grey for all the rest. I use dark washes because this model is big and packed with sharp edges, panel lines, and tiny deep details. And I don't want to lose time or spoil the fun hunting for those time-consuming, precise borders and outlines. But I really like my tones and values, and an acrylic wash still giving similar results on the details, maybe just a bit less sharp and precise, would massively alter those parameters. Using oils, I can just slap a bunch of paint on the model, without too much care. Clean the excess, and get the details I need without any extra side effects. Ooh, and I apply the wash in this early stage, because I just want to complete the map of basic, sculpted information, on top of which I'll work with bolder applications and looser brushstrokes that again, at the end, I don't want to see modified in any way. Still, depending on how you spread and clean it, you can also get a bit of free smooth modulation here and there. And since chaos models are so pointy, I limit the use of my usual Q-tips to avoid leaving a bunch of little hairs trapped on the infinite tiny spikes. Even when dry to the touch, the small quantity of oil paint inside the recesses will remain active and playable for a few hours. But after cleaning the excess, there is no paint or oily medium left on the other raised areas, so I can immediately move back to acrylics. During the holidays, I use the excuse of Christmas presents to reinvigorate my collection of heavy body acrylics with a good batch of Schmincke Prime Acryl. And if you are maliciously suggesting that all this rambling about layering is just a way to play with new toys, well, you are probably right. The transparent tones tend to a slightly glossy finish, while the opaque colors remain more satin, so perfect for anything related to skin. But depending on the situation, I balance their behavior with a solid matte medium that's also quite thick to maintain their beautiful high density. I use the thick consistency of the paint to apply bold, organic, painterly brushstrokes, simply following the basic volumes of the sculpt, with a from general to particular logic. For example, the arm is, first of all, a big cylinder that takes the light as a big cylinder, and only after that it's a collection of smaller masses with their own shapes, but still inside that cylinder, and its general flow of lights and shadows. From the chromatic point of view, I'm simply moving around the color wheel, building up lighter values with tones that are progressively closer and closer to the classic Diablo, Lord of Darkness, or the old version of the Demon Prince red skin that I have in mind, but with still something oddly human. Basically, an ascending spiral moving from the dark, cold shadows to warm, vibrant lights. Of course, you can, and you should create this progression by mixing hues from a more contained palette. But I really want to test as many colors as possible. So what you see on the palette is less essential than usual, and a bit biased by my curiosity. The skin is far from being finished, but since in my everyday work I tend to visualize and establish all the values at the beginning with a value sketch, I don't feel safe painting the full progression in a single run without some references all around, and I need to see a bit of the evolution of the other parts to decide how much I want to push. Don't worry, the acrylic gouache is still my first choice for when I need a seriously matte, inorganic finish, a smooth layer without visible brushstrokes, or razor-sharp details. I know, this stuff is impossible to see in video, but I can assure you that in person, the difference between the satin finish of the skin, the true metallic shine of the trims, and the solid matte finish of the equipment makes a huge visual impact, as a crazy extra level of tactile contrast. Even making videos full time, my main concern is always the real life experience of the painted model. Here I use again the desaturated blue notes of Payne's Grey that, in a more essential way, I brighten with increasing doses of ivory. A warm off-white that will help building up the sensation of a subtle, warm light source. Something like a distant warm sun in outer space, or light bouncing from a nearby moon on a desolated planetoid. Layering doesn't imply that you can use only flat sequential applications, and still using the same general concept. The choice of brushstrokes can completely change the look of an area. In this case, my brushstrokes are all about building up layers and layers of overlapped scratches, because that's the gritty nature of the material I'm trying to render. moving the work on the bone spikes of the armor and continuing to follow the map of my base tones, I use a light green turquoise as the main new tone. That then I highlight with the same warm ivory, because we are still in the same general environment. Again, I jump off a clearly unfinished area to balance and shape the work into something easier to understand in terms of internal composition of values and value progression. The gold is kind of my anchor here. Because, at least in this case, I know precisely how I want it to look like. So I can push it to its extreme consequences, and then key everything else on its visual behavior. I start the progression with a classic regal warm gold. And I drastically increase the value for the extreme points of light using sharp brushstrokes that mimic the ones used on the armor, but in a smaller, finer scale. Like working on non-metallic metal, to really push on the non-metallic look, you should maintain a very high contrast between layers, even if the paint used has an intrinsic ability to catch and bounce light. Now I can go back to the skin, continuing to follow the ascending spiral of values and tones that keeps moving into warmer territories, and also a bit into the uncanny valley, thanks to the turn on more natural skin tones. And to the armor, where I keep building up the intricate pattern of lines, scratches and battle damage with lighter variations of the same basic recipe. The speed of the process is difficult to perceive in this video. Thing that will definitely be clearer in the real-time version on Patreon, but I'm sure you can perceive the untamed roughness of a quick layering that skipped a lot of smoothing intermediate steps. But, again, luckily, this is totally part of the workflow. You can spend a lot of extra time bridging the gaps between a layer and another with extra intermediate layers, or a lot of glazing at the end. Or you can do all that work with an airbrush in a matter of minutes. Using something in between heavily diluted, semi-transparent, semi-opaque paint, I reintroduce the information of the midtones, that are by their own nature the bridge between light and shadows, and naturally flow into both, smoothing out the full progression into something that retains all the rich painterly brushwork and textural information, in a finish that looks way more refined. the tones I'm using shouldn't be a surprise at this point. The hue of the mid-tones has been set at the very beginning of the work, so I just need to go back to the sketch and bring out the foundational blue, violet magenta and turquoise, on top of which I've built everything else. The downside of the trick is that the mid-value mid-tones have the tendency to pull the progression into their mid-range average of the visual spectrum. But working with highly transparent applications, the shadows are almost untouched and often deepened because they mostly swallow the new tone into their low values. So basically, I just need to retouch and re-establish the highest highlights, bringing them back to their initial peaks. And in reality, now that I have the full view on the model, probably even a bit farther. Again, the structure of the shades is fully set, and I just need to follow the final consequences of my initial choices. And here is the final result, closing the work around the 5-6 hours. After so many units and warbands that you'll see again in the next weeks, I thought to start introducing options for speed painting monsters and heroes that are part of those same armies, and for which we are always looking for a slightly higher density of details and quality of rendering, without obviously sacrificing too much extra time. And I think that the modern layering approach is a great, super effective way to start investigating those options. Plus, to be honest, this was kind of a revenge against the previous incarnation of the Demon Prince. A model that I bought as a kid, investing months of my micro allowance, and that I never found the guts to paint. I swear, it's still in its original box in my parents' house. So I tried to exorcise the demon, pun intended, with a thematically vintage approach.
If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe. Remember that you can ask me anything down below with a comment, and you can follow my projects during the week using one of my socials. And if you want to support my work, check my Patreon page and join the community, or maybe ask for a commission. See you next week, guys!